Okay, my name is Dennis Gill with the American Wartime Museum. Today's date is 15 February 2019, and I am at the Tank Farm in Oaksville, Virginia, conducting an interview with Clement. Sir, if you could tell me your name, where were you born, and when were you born?
Let me remember now. It's Richard B. Clement. The nickname is Clem. You get that when you're in the military. First part of your last name. I was born in Woodbury, New Jersey, Underwood Hospital. My distant uncle owned the hospital, and that was in.
Okay.
That makes me a bazillion years old. Getting older every day.
Right. That's a good thing, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a good thing.
And what war or conflict did you participate in?
Cuban Missile Crisis and Vietnam. Vietnam, two tours. One as a flying tour in the summer of '64, and two as a staff officer in headquarters 7th Air Force, 67, 68.
Okay.
67, 68 means Tet 1, Tet 2, and Tet 3.
Okay. And Air Force, correct?
Air Force.
Okay. You had other members of your family that were military, correct?
My father fought in War I. He arrived in France in 1918 just in time to, his words now, smoke cigars and drink some wine and come home.
Okay.
But I don't believe he ever smoked, and I know he didn't like wine. But that's the way to do the war. Come. He did go back on the special trip with President, oh boy, the president at that time in the mid-20s took a boatload of veterans back to France.
Okay.
And he got the pictures with the president. He took his wife, my mother, back then.
Okay.
I'm obviously 23 and a half years in the Air Force. Sandy is about 6 years in the Air Force as a flight nurse, 2,500 hours in the C9. She went to the factory to sign for the Air Force for 5 of the C9s.
Okay. Sandy is who to you? How is she related to you?
Well, let me check my notebook here. My beloved, beloved wife.
Okay.
Our one of our son-in-laws is retired Navy. Came out as a commander. He's now, as I said, retired flying for Delta.
Okay.
I am a birthright Quaker. So you need to know there was if you're talking what's back in here,
right.
Birthright is a conscientious objector. I went to George School, which is a Quaker high school, and it was a real challenge to face the elders in my meeting in Jersey that I really wanted to wear the uniform of my country.
Right.
But one, I kind of liked the country. Two, I did not understand democracy. I said, it sounds good to me. It seems like it needs to be defended or at least treated.
Right. And
I wanted to fly.
Okay.
It was a challenge all the way along.
So why the Air Force?
Well, it's the best service. One or two, I wanted to fly. Simple. The first answer to that is ROTC. I went through Stevens Institute of Technology in Hoboken, and after my freshman year, Daddy passed away. So we were scrambling to find enough bucks to get, because I had nothing, nothing, but a great family. So the ROTC picked up, and I've forgotten the details. They picked up the first 2 years.
Okay.
Then if you sign up for, you got to do something else, and then they pick up the rest of your career. And they were right there with pen in hand when, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to fly, and I want to go in the Air Force.
Okay.
I saw, now that with an education and an opportunity to be an officer, I didn't think I wanted to be ground forces. Navy would have been the second option, but really never thought about it. I wanted to fly. So I got into flying school and passed.
Any preference of what you wanted to fly? Or just wanted to fly?
Well, you're first, when you watch all the movies and stuff, you want to be Steve Canyon, you want to fly upside down at night without barfing. I was about halfway through my class. So when you came up to assignments, the system was really simple. They put all the assignments on the blackboard, and the first guy in the class went in and says, I'll take that. And they crossed right through it and left it there. And then the next guy came in and said, I'll take that one, crossed through it, left it there. So we were halfway through the class when it got to me. So the fighters were gone. But I lived at Brigantine during the war, the WW2, and I studied weather down there. And Mother was a genealogist and a geologist and all kinds of things. And here partway down the list is WB-50. flies into hurricanes. Well, I can do that because I went through the two hurricanes in '44 on the beach, being carried, watching the storms. So the next thing I know, I'm flying B-50s, WB-50, WB-50D, 4-engine recip, specially configured for air sampling. So my first 3 years were air sampling. Obviously weather. Our missions in Cuba were supposedly working on the air diffraction index for the B-52s. I'm sorry, I don't know what that means, because they're smarter than that. But we were never over land. We were circled at the 12 miles and 1 inch outside. So you could see Cuba right in the pilot's window, but we didn't go over Cuba. But that did get me 5 nuclear detonations on this body. And I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to have a little bit of hair. This was Christmas Island in '62, and we were back for Starboard, which was the exoatmospheric detonation in the fall of '62, I think. But I got 5 of them on me, including Starboard was the exoatmospheric. And were we scared to death? You bet. We were way more scared 20 years later when you found out that the thing detonated on the way down. It went up to 300 some clicks and it turned over. And when it got to the correct altitude coming down, it went kaplowey. We'd have been a whole lot less confident because we were figuring you got 2 shots going up. If it doesn't work, keep hitting the button. Anyway, it went off and it did. And I hope if there's a message from me is don't ever pull a pin on a nuclear weapon. In no way in hell. Put them all out on the field, disassemble them, use them for electric power or whatever good medical reasons. Don't ever, ever, ever pop another nuke. I've seen 5 of them, and when it goes off, there's nothing you want to say. You're just stunned. I'll add a piece if I can stay on it for just a second. One's funny, one's real. Both are real, one's funny. The first shot at Christmas Island, they didn't know what to do with us. The crews that aren't flying, so they put us in an old Quonset hut. It was all open, so it had pigeons and seagulls up in it and all that. So the first bomb goes off and the pressure wave goes off, and the pigeons and the seagulls have run reaction. That's launch. So there's dust and dirt, and the pigeons and the seagulls clear their pipes. So it's all this stuff is raining on us. So they said that's not where we want the rest of the people. Now, again, so the rest of the shots were out on the runway or the parking ramps, back to the blast, which is 24 miles line of sight from us, with the best goggles the Air Force had, which were welding goggles, welding helmet. The glass is number 10, and you're like this. If the blast is behind me, you're like, all right, like this. The blast is back there, okay? And it goes off, and there's a sudden heat wave that comes through, instant heat wave, and it's not going to burn you, but it's a little bit warm. And the pressure wave is about like that from 24 miles. Not to knock you down, but you feel it. The stunning thing for me was I'm looking through number 10 goggles, and I can see the pressure in the artery, the pressure bulge. I can see the artery expand as the pressure comes down from my heart. And I can see the veins draining back out through both hands. So I'm seeing skeleton, like the thing they used to have for checking your shoes fit. And I'll tell you now, that's bright. So as I said, don't pop anymore, please. Go.
Are you on the ground when this is happening?
I both flew them and I was on the ground. When you're not, let me start my paragraph. The whole island, Christmas Island, is wired for sound. And Mahatma was the announcer, and he's telling everybody what to do. But they learned from earlier Bimini shots, you don't want to leave the troops sleeping because you're going to wake up kaplooey, So everybody was gathered from the American side. The British were gone by then. The British were 58, we were 62. The British were gone. Everybody in our area was brought into a central area, right by in the airplane parking area. So they had control of them. So, and then they had people in various places that knew what you're doing. And the commanders are supposed to have everybody. You couldn't sleep through it. You weren't allowed to sleep through it. And so when it kaboom, and then you're excused for the day to do, as required. The photograph was such that That's the wind pattern above us.
Okay.
The wind pattern's gone the other way. It's not coming our way. And that was part of what we did the photograph. We were under the B-52 that dropped the bombs 17 minutes prior to release. So we're looking up at the doors come open. And then we're scooting out. We were about 35 miles from it in the air, and 24 miles from it on the ground. Okay. And I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be here.
And this is Christmas Island?
Christmas Island.
Explain us, where is that?
I can tell you exactly. You go to Honolulu and turn left.
Okay.
For 1,000 miles, and you look down, it's right there.
Okay.
It's past not Muscle Shoals. It's past French Frigate Shoals. Some more. It's British colony. It was a coaling station during WW2. The Brits, I think, they own it, but I don't know that they have anybody stationed there anymore. When we were there, the Brits had the nuclear testing were gone, but they had a station with 3 or 4 officers and an officers club, and everybody lived in the club. Okay. And a detachment well away from us. We were not legally allowed to mess with them, because we're doing different things. And then we had an array of airplanes and all kinds of scientists, which we didn't. Right. They were somewhere else.
So when you're flying during one of these, what is your mission? What are you doing?
The mission ahead of the release of the weapon was preparing the photograph. Okay. So you're flying at altitude. You're taking weather obs all the time. Okay. You're looking for daytime cumulus. Most of the shots I were involved, I want to say all, but I won't. The objective was fairly early in the day, right, before the day Q picked up and the rumbly bumblies picked up. On those shots, they wanted ground cameras to see the shot, to look at the shape of the mushroom, okay, the rate of change, all that sort of stuff. Right. So we wanted to know where it was on a blow, which was farther west and south, and we wanted to be able to take pictures as far as possible. And that was reported obs from the air. Right. We had a weatherman on board. Okay. And part of the decision to release the bomb had to do with the weatherman, wherever that control was listening to us. And then once it detonated, we went away. Okay. We got in the pattern and came on in and landed. They did have a short-wing B-57 that went through the stem. As soon as they had a stem, he went through it. And he was wearing a full leather vest, full lead vest. Lead vest, okay. And the cockpit was covered with a canvas, from the inside, canvas cover, and number 10 goggles. And he was heading for that thing before he knew where it was and was way back, and right, put all that down and through it and pitched out and landed. And he had air sampling equipment on it, because they wanted to know the quality of the explosion. Right. Okay. I was not involved in that.
And you were involved in 5. How many in the air?
3.
3. So 3 in the air.
2 or 3. Yeah. Okay. When then I was involved in starboard. That was Johnston Island. That was exo-atmospheric. That was an Atlas. Okay. With blue scouts supporting it, and that's way up. And that one was at night, above an overcast, a thin overcast. So you didn't get to see. You saw the light, but it didn't bother you. Yeah. And that was 2 or 3 months later. Okay. Okay.
So you were 5 on Christmas Island, or you were
4?
4 on Christmas Island and 1.
Yeah, and that's
okay.
I've looked at my records, and best my memory, I did 4. Okay. We would be there a week or 2, and then we would go back to Hawaii for repairs or whatnot, because we were cycling crews through there, and you never knew what was ready, because you popped the thing, then you had to get a target. Right. It obviously destroyed. I say obviously, it destroyed the target, which was a raft with various with sensors on it, with beacons on it to make sure you dropped it on the right thing and not on us. Disregard that. Make sure everything was right, and then you had to get that repositioned, and you had to, the bombs came out of Barbers Point on Hawaii, on Oahu, on the main island, not the big island.
Okay.
and they were stored on shipboard off of that, so they were brought in there and put on. So it took sometimes a week, sometimes 2 or 3 days. And if something didn't go right, then we didn't go. And if the weather was bad, we didn't go.
And they would drop from B-52s?
B-52.
Okay.
And that airplane is at Kirtland Air Force Base.
Okay.
In pieces, but it's that airplane. They used one. If they had a backup, I don't know anything about it, but that's what they used. They dropped them from 30,000, 40,000 feet.
Gotcha. Okay. I want to go back real quick to your training. So you do basic training in San Antonio.
Basic
correct?
training in San Antonio. We learned to march.
Right.
We're supposed to know that. Yeah. We learned to fold our underwear. We got wind that the restriction on a pilot had to do with your maximum height.
Okay.
And 27 inches sitting height. That's from the bottom of the chair, with your backbone didn't have to touch the chair, but your back of your head did.
Okay.
That's important. Okay.
Okay.
Because I'm 2.5 inches too tall to fly. So we were carrying the little guys. We carried the little guys to march every day. We marched. 4 of us were marching with people on.
Right.
When we couldn't find anybody to carry, we wore overcoats in the summer to shrink, compress your backbone. And thank God for sergeants, and thank God for the enlisted people that carried me all the way through, that told me how to fill in my health reform report to join the Air Force.
Right.
I had, broken leg, broken ankle, broken arm, whatnot. And the sergeant said, "Lieutenant, there's no hope."
Right.
"Does it hurt this morning?" "No." "Good." Threw the whole form out.
Right.
I had put on there, I had hay fever, which takes me out of the service.
Yeah.
He said, No. "Do you sniffle this morning?" "No, clear this morning. All done." None of that's on the record,
Right.
because I was a special case with hay fever from birth.
Right.
So they did that. We all got through the seating thing, because a wonderful, gray-haired, I think he was a master, with a big, smooth voice, and son, son,
Right.
hair like you and I had. "Do you want to fly?" And yes, sir. I called him sir. Anything, I don't
Right.
I don't want to make any move, because he says no, I'm done.
Yeah.
And we all knew that. We all prepared for that day, and our people said, "Let's prepare for him." And he said, "Well, now, son, I'm going to have to teach you how to sit." And I'm just holding my breath. He said, your back, I'll do this. I know the timer's not there. You got to push all the way back, your butt hit. And then your back of your head has got to hit the measurement stick.
Right.
But he said, "I want your backbone to look like this." So I can get my fist in it right now. I could get 2 or 3 fists worth in my backbone, all
Right.
stretched back and all right. He said, "I've seen it."
Right.
Put that initials of that master sergeant. If we could have, we'd have hugged him. If we could have, we'd have left him a little
Right.
something with a black label on it somewhere.
Right.
But
Right.
of course we did not. And that got me into flying school.
Okay. So, where do you go from there? Where's your pilot training after you get out of basic?
I get out of basic, which is Randolph. I go to Bainbridge, Georgia, and that was civilian flyers, Bainbridge Air Base,
Okay.
little town in Georgia. We flew T-34s and T-37s, and then we went to a basic, our primary, I guess,
Right.
and that was Laredo, Texas, in T-Birds.
Okay. And is that where you decided what you were going to fly? That's where you picked the aircraft you were going to fly, or what type of aircraft?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I almost missed that one. Yes, toward the end of that stuff, they said, "Well, look, all you guys are apparently going to pass this thing." We're scared to death. They're really scary, and that's where the magic blackboard
Right.
was. And I picked the WB, and my buddy was right behind me, and he picked the photographic B-50, photo bird.
Okay.
He went to South America. They were doing a geodetic survey of the world, because the maps of the world were no good, and they were flying over a lot of it. And he did that. Both type airplanes, all the B-50s are in the boneyard. So I was in the weather squadron for 2.5 years, and then we took them all to Davis-Monthan and parked them,
Okay.
which is one of my 2 bad landings, because nobody's going on an airplane. I'm the last landing. I'm the last DNA on that airplane. We parked it. They cut it up for Budweiser cans, and
And
they were using the engines on C-124s and C-97s and whatnot, so the good stuff came off, and the rest of it was melted into aluminum ingots about this big.
So the WB-50 was for air sampling. Was there any other use for that aircraft?
It was no. We carried a weatherman.
Okay.
We were members of the 55th Weather.
Okay.
We did primary. The mission you did all the time was without the air sampling. Was to say all equipment was on board, but you were flying primarily out of Eielson heading north. You coasted out at Barter Island and coasted back in at Point Barrow.
Okay.
And you did 8 to 10 hours out there. That's the fetch. That's the source for the weather for America. All this cold air we're freezing here came from waving by the Eskimos as it went by. So you could get enough information to get a sense that it's coming.
Right.
The next wave, as you read every night with the news, the next
Right.
wave is coming. That's where it started.
Okay.
That's where it started. Then when somebody we chased Chinese fallout and Russian fallout. So when there was a detonation at Kamchatka or wherever the Chinese did it, that cloud goes around the Earth, still going around the Earth, but the intense cloud came over the Arctic, over toward UK, and we would go find it. There was no weather satellites out there. There was nothing. You had to do it by the weatherman saying, well, it went off here, and we'll calculate, and then you go find it.
Right.
And we had indication in the airplane that we're in the cloud, and we had a special agent called a customer. Turned out to be CIA, but whatnot, with equipment to read what we're in right now, and that had screens in it, all unclassified. That had screens, a little box in the back that is about this big, sitting up on the airplane,
Right.
and a screen in it. And when the screen got to a certain density of atoms, ions, whatever, the customer would remove that screen and put it in a 75-pound lead suitcase and put up another one. Then screens on the wingtip looked like a fuel tank. Screens were 36 inches, big round things, and they stayed the whole flight. You understand the difference?
Yeah.
They're going to have it all.
Right.
But the little one is going to have current. So it's going to give you, if you got 6 screens, you've got six cuts of this out, and to get the radioactive material out.
Gotcha.
When we went to the boneyard, the C-130s had compressors, and compressed air, brought it into had pallets with high pressure bottles on it. When you turned it on, it sucked air in and actually kept it there. And when you came home, you said to CIA, here's all these bottles. Good luck. And we also did Big Bird. That was C-130s were catching photo canisters from overhead. And we were ahead of them for forecast of weather.
Gotcha.
Because you had to have decent weather and you had to have everything right. And then you had a fairly small window to cut the thing loose because the satellite kicked it out.
Right.
Go.
Right.
So once that started, you're there. And the C-130 had a fork in the front of it. And when the parachute came out, here comes the parachute, and the C-130 hits the parachute, and the satellite's brought in the back, and not the satellite, the canisters. And the film is developed and dispensed on the ground.
Okay.
Not to my, funny places I don't know anything about. They was out of Hawaii, but it was not our airplanes.
Right.
But we did the forecast of the weather, usually west of Hawaii.
You said something that caught my eye or caught my attention. You said that the new clouds would travel around the Earth.
Yeah.
And they're still doing that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what does that have any effect on the weather? Does it have any effect on us?
No, I had kids before it, and I had kids after it.
Okay.
5 of them, and they're all pretty good.
There you go.
Of course it does.
Yeah.
Of course it does. And I'm no expert, so I don't want to do much of it because I might lie. But you've got an ambient level that's only doing this, just getting better. We're breathing some of it here because it doesn't. The half-life is, whatever it is, several 100,000 years, all that stuff. And it depends on what they had. There's nuclear, there's thermonuclear, there's didn't work so well. There's whatever. When the French started testing, JFK said we got to start to test. So they put together the test program in like 60 days.
Okay.
So it was a lot of scrambling. And the British said, go ahead and use Christmas Island. and there's some stories on that, but I'll stay to the to the published stuff.
So from Christmas Island, where do you head from there?
Well,
What's your next assignment?
Yeah, the next is pretty quickly, 64. We took all the airplanes to the boneyard. And I had a great assignment up in McCord, Washington, but I was, I'm one, the people that say, hey, don't you ever volunteer for something? Wrong answer. I've always got my hand in the air. Because every once in a while, cookies come down.
Right.
But usually the first 10 things are really bad. And so you never volunteered for a taxi check on an airplane, never. Because you had an accident that was a flying accident, but you got no flying time. You just got spanked. Right. So you didn't want to do that. So I did 5 or 6 right away as a young man. How to do this. So then when something nice come along, old Clem said, I've done all those lousy things.
Right.
How about that good thing?
Right.
We did fly weather one trip for when President Kennedy went to Central America. We were ahead of him flying weather. That was kind of special. A good story there. Proud to do that for anybody. Everybody had assignments. They were shutting down the squadron, and we were on the last missions to Hawaii. And 2 emergency requests for pilots, aircraft commanders came in to go to Japan. And since we were the only members of the squadron that was not home to say no,
right.
They said, Clem will go, and another Lieutenant, Gary Stevens, will go. So we found ourselves scrambling to get to Japan, 421st Aerial Refueling Squadron, KB-50s. This is 4 turning and 2 burning, right. 2 J-47s, 4 4360s. So there's a lot of horsepower. And 3 miles of plumbing and 7 miles of wire. The B-50s, which is Korean War vintage, were different ones, not the W's. And there was recce birds, there was photograph birds, these were tankers. Okay. Designation is KB. And they had either J model or K model, or maybe it was an L model, but it had J-47s on the thing. When I'll come back, a company in Birmingham, it's an H word, I want to say Hayes, they won the contract to convert the B-50D to tankers. And Boeing came down to see what they were doing, and Boeing decertified the airplane. So we're not responsible. So we got no help. That out unit, the several units, there was a bunch of them all, got no help from the Boeing company, because they said this thing is never going to fly. And it worked out to be about every 18 months you lost a crew in an airplane. Right. I was there 18 months, and we lost 2 engines exploded within 90 seconds of each other, all rebuilt by Aerodix in Miami with the same time on it. And they blew within 90 seconds, and that killed half the crew. One in Thailand just decided to catch fire. The wingtip to wingtip was on fire. We do not know, but they were fairly low. They, in an orderly fashion, bailed out. Everybody was safe. Some accidents, some trouble on the ground, but everybody got out of that thing. So, and that was the second. That was 2 within a month. And the Air Force said, we're just, that's it. Because we were the only tankers at that time. The SAC tankers were not there. The KC-135s, the KC-97s. Well, 97s never went there. The KC-135s, am I loud enough?
Yeah. The
KC-135s were not there yet.
Okay.
SAC wouldn't let them go. SAC had a rule that said you can't refuel forward-firing airplanes. Guns, an airplane has forward-firing guns. Right. F-100s, F-105s, F-4s eventually, Mark 61, blah, 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 blah. So that was us. And they were glad to have us. We did a lot of, we think, good work, right, and some exciting work. And we survived it. Right. All but 1 crew. So I been back through training. I had to go all through the tanker school in Japan. And my TDYs then included Misawa to help out. The F-100s were Misawa. Itazuki were the 105s. Testing in Korea, we would go over and bring a bunch of fighters with us and turn them loose against the South Korean radar. Okay. Try to sneak in. You got to practice. You're practicing every day, always. Right. Yeah, I always have to practice. And then June came up of '64, and we started being involved in special missions in Southeast Asia, TDY. I'm proud to say that I believe I was the first one in Tonsanok. We were flying at that time out of Saigon, now Ho Chi Minh City. I hate to call it that. We were up in the, up off of just south of Hainan. I think it's the China Sea in there. And we were refueling 100s that were there to support high flyers, U-2s and SR-71s that were taking pictures of North Vietnam. And we were there with a collection of fighters. Constantly, we were cycling in and out of Da Nang and feeding the fighters fuel, and just were all kind of there waiting. And if the big boys needed help, needed defense, we went after them. Otherwise, we all went home, and they never needed it. So we were there. I'm proud of 1,000 things, let me tell you. But we land. The first time we land in Saigon, we're supposed to check in. We're TDY, and they said, "You officers, we're going to take you down to a hotel downtown. We have no room for you on base, but you enlisted people in the crew, and we had a flight engineer and 2 real operators and a couple of maintenance guys. You're going to stay on base in tents." Tents. And you know what the temperature is down there. Same temperature as today, hot, and rains every day. And one of my real operators happened to be black, but that's not part of the story. He says, "Lieutenant Clem," I was Lieutenant Clem, you know, he said, "I'm not staying here." Oh, jeez. Not my first mission, but the first mission to South Hill. I said, "What's the matter?" He said, "Well, they're putting us in tents." I said, "That's not good. We can do something about that." And he said, "But sir, over my bunk is a bullet hole in the tent." I said, "Well, rain's in, doesn't it now? You don't understand. That killed a guy. The guy was sleeping in the bunk. The bullet came in through the hole, killed him." He said, "I'm not saying." I said, "You got that right. Let's see how much this silver bar is going to be." I mean, it wasn't butter bar, it was silver bar. So I said, "We're going downtown. We're all going downtown. Or we're leaving. Or we're leaving. We're leaving." Whew. Turns out, they said, "Okay, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir." And then word got back to the wing commander back home that Lieutenant Clem was looking after his people. So without further notice, the wing commander said, "All my people that you send TDY will stay off base in Saigon in a safe hotel," and they had several safe hotels.
There you
go. So I will show you in that little box that I brought in. The son of one of my dear friends made a badge for me, made an award for me called Combat Clem. Okay. So I'm Combat Clem. I ended up with 27 combat support missions out of that unit, out of Southeast Asia.
All in tankers?
All in tankers.
What aircraft did you fly?
KB-50.
50.
TDY, we were always TDY.
Okay.
What happened, how's my time? We doing all right?
Good.
So we were in and out. Aircraft have inspections, they have procedures, they have a lot of things to do, so you can't stay forever somewhere. So you're cycling the airplanes over to Clark. Clark had engines, spare engine change, and on the big inspections you went back to, because you're TDY, you went back home. Right. So we're cycling through the summer, and then about 6 August, the Maddox, the disaster with the Maddox kicked off. The president was looking for a reason to do good, so we launched. We took a 5-ship to Okinawa, and we were supposed to refuel the F-105s going from, by then, Yokota, and they were heading for Karat, the beginning of the build-up. So we, after 24 hours of getting ready, they said launch. And I guess I should say by then I was out of crew duty because everybody was put to bed early except Lieutenant Clement, because somebody stole all our food out of the airplane, and that was a federal offense. So we had to wait till the guy was captured. A young airman took it. Our airmen are not paid. Were not paid well then, and not paid well now, and they're saving our country. And they got him and whatnot. So when I went to bed that night, I already had 24 hours of duty, and we got the alert to go. And I'm not a hero. Don't bleed down as a hero, but I'm thinking, if this is my one chance to go, I'm going. So takeoff was tough, situation was tough. 24 more hours later, we're in Bangkok, and then from there the next morning into Tockley. And we cycled out of Tockley mostly from then on until sometime in October, when they withdrew the squadron from everywhere and parked us until I got the paperwork ready and sent them all to the boneyard. There's one at Pima County. There's a KB-50 at Pima County, and there's a KB-50 in Macon, I think. There's 3 or 4 around, but most of them are cut up.
Right.
The one in Pima County, which is the private museum outside of Davis-Monthan, I have time on. That number. So we made a visit to that place. I got to take the microphone from the tour bus. The guy says, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Just hang on." I gave the story, and I'm crying. I said, "That old girl and I have been looking down at a lot of jungle in Laos," and everybody was clapping.
Right.
And it's still there when I go see it.
How long? You're TDY when you're flying in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
How long generally are you there at a stretch?
Yeah. It was based on the airplanes, not on me.
Okay.
And it ended up to being 62 credible counting days. It counted for time in country. Okay. Then when the squadron closed, I went to headquarters PACAF. They forced me to go to Hawaii. Thank you very much, folks. And I stayed there, got my master's there. Flew Goonie birds, C-47, got, 300 hours in that. But when I went back to Vietnam, from Hawaii, I went back to Vietnam, I had 62 days credit on a 1-year tour. So that second tour, I got a flying tour and a staff tour.
Okay.
The staff tour was about 10 months long, and that was in headquarters, 7th Air Force, by name assignment to the command post.
Okay.
In there, I was a flag breaker. I ended up being the operations briefer, 3 of us, to General Momire and General Brown.
Okay.
That's the morning ops briefing. But I was not allowed to fly on the second part of a tour, because I was an emergency actions duty officer while in Hawaii, which means I knew the war plan, the go-to-war plan for the Pacific. We had nuclear weapons at that time in Korea, Philippines, and Okinawa, which was ours at that time. Okinawa we've since returned to the Japanese, the rightful owners. So was that hard on me? Yes, because I'm trained to be a pilot. I'm behind this desk, and I worked most of the time. That time was nighttime, so not my fun. But
going back to your time flying in Vietnam, was there any missions that stood out, or were they all pretty much routine, as routine as that could be, I guess?
Flying an old tired airplane that wants to blow up is not routine.
Not routine.
I was proud to say that I knew the bird pretty well from the time in my WB. So I knew, I'll say on the camera, every nut and bolt and washer, but I might have missed a couple.
Right.
Because we always had fun to test each other. Do you know what that's for and why, and where's a circuit breaker for this? And that's professional fun, because you need to know.
Right.
Because I've been through takeoff with smoke, with a cockpit full of smoke, and trying to find a circuit breaker in the smoke is fun. Yeah, I can do that. Everything I have is unclassified. There's the secret part of the mission I didn't know about. I'm going to cover that. But we knew where we were up near, like I said, near Hainan. Not on airspace. We're 12 miles, or probably 20, 30 miles. But it's sitting right over there. And we've got F-100s around us, and we're just keeping them the right amount of fuel. So if anybody calls, if either the U-2 or through the command post system, through Monkey Mountain, that was our commanding authority, the fighters would go and we'd start cycling. And we set up where we had 2 tankers, and everybody took fuel from one to drain him, to get him to go to Da Nang to get some more fuel. So you want to have the objective is have X number of 1,000 pounds of fuel on hand at any one time.
Right.
And the KB-50 would refuel 3 fighters at a time. It had three hoses.
Okay.
So you had spare airplane up there, and the first guy, and then he went back to, and I was leader, so I got to, on that one, I got to go back to Da Nang first. And I landed, and this is a great big old KB-50, and there's stuff dripping out of everywhere. It's leaking and drifting and smoking. Oh, it's wonderful. And I said, I'm going to need 75,000 pounds of gas. I need nav gas and JP4.
Right.
And I get to meet some full colonel. He's not happy. He said, I don't have that much. Not my problem. And I'm, Lieutenant Clem.
Right.
It's always Lieutenant Clem. I had
Right.
no rank at all. Well, sorry. And he said, I'm going to call the general. I said, here's the number, but get me some gas. I don't care if you run out. You got fellow Americans up there messing around with the enemy, and I'm going to take care of it. I'll take every drop of gas you get. I could feed the fighters either kind of gas. They didn't like avgas, but they would take it. You could get home on it.
Right.
You had to check on the fuel control when you got home. The F-105, you had to change the fuel control, but it would take it. And we could burn our own gas and our own jet fuel. So there was enough of that stored down.
Right.
So up there, now if you picture me, the overhead guys, they're not overhead. I keep using that word, I'm sorry. The high flyers, we don't ever see them, nothing, it's all quiet, we know nothing. And we're all gathered around in this area where we can get them. It's north of Ile de Tigre, which is right at the end of Route Pack 1. And the fighters started messing with me, coming close and fooling around, because we're nothing doing. We're just sitting there taking gas. And every fighter needs so many, it's called a stick, so many hits a month. So how you guys doing? Well, I need 2 more, Clem, and I need, it's down now to Clem and John and Harry.
Right.
And doing that. And the fighters started playing with us, so I said, hey, controller, can I deviate here? I want to have a war right here. They said, well, you can't do that. I mean, you're at war. No, I want to do some air maneuvers, and the fighters are going to try to shoot me down.
Right.
You can't move. Oh, Jesus! That was a big stink. They said, you stay in your pattern. I'm looking out the window. I don't see anything. You stay in your. And then finally, the guy says, Lieutenant Clem, call me when you get on the ground. Oh, Jesus. Yeah, okay. I'm going to get violated for that. But meanwhile, the kind of fun you do with a fighter and a tanker, you get him on the drogue, on the hose.
Yeah.
And you say, geez, we can't see you. Can you move it up a little bit? And that gets a fighter pilot's attention because there's nothing else going on.
Right.
And then you say, is that as close you can get? Now he's about 6 feet from the wing, and he's right in there. And that's absolutely safe. So that's it, huh? That's as close you can get? Okay. But while he's getting closer, you're walking your power back just a little bit. Now, don't take me to jail for this. We're all learning to fly. You pull your power back a little bit. And he's getting heavier,
Right.
and the airplane's getting slower. So pretty soon he has to disconnect because he's in burner. He's in burner to keep it in there. And he finally figures out, damn, old Clem has slowed down. Damn old Clem. So and I'm laughing at the guy. So he has to pull off absolutely safely. And I can hear brum, brum, brum. So I tell him the interphone to my crew. I said, we won one, boys, but we're going to lose. So hang on to your side. And I'm going to tell them we're going to lose. They're going to win this thing.
Right.
So he's back about, 100 yards. 200 yards, and you can see him coming. You see he lights his burner, and you can see a little bit of smoke, and they say, here he comes, under our airplane, and then straight up. I'm looking out to nothing but F-100. and here we go, and I got to say it. And my co-pilot says, Clem, don't say it. Lieutenant Clem says, stinks in here, which meant he was close enough for his fumes, his jet fumes,
Right.
to get right into my cockpit. That's what But that spirit, don't be reporting, don't do anything. That's the spirit of the day. We later on we were living in the same barracks together, and it was a wonderful thing because you briefed there all the time. You talked at night. Hey, you could say things there that you didn't want to say on the air. How do you do this? What can we help you this? All trying to make professional.
Right.
But I'm almost done with my story. Don't get me on stories. The guy the high flyers don't need us, so we're released back, and I get on the ground. I call. He says, Lieutenant Clem, do you know why we were fussing at you, sir? And I said, I haven't the slightest idea. He said, the Chinese and the Russians were airborne in the same pattern over Hainan, doing just like this. And that's, 40 miles away, just like this. He said, right on the border of their air operations area, there were 4 or 5 or 6, it was a flock of MiGs airborne,
Right.
hoping that you would do something stupid. So I had again, if I'd had something with a black label on it, it might have gotten up there, but I didn't have anything.
Right.
How's that for a story?
Yeah.
You like that one? True.
So let me ask you, so as you know, the war in Vietnam wasn't exactly popular. Did you guys have any sense of what was going on here while you were over there, and did it have any effect whatsoever on morale or anything like that, or was it just, we have a mission to do and we're going to do it?
Well, the professional answer, of course, is we have a mission, we're going to do it.
Right.
Another obvious situation is communications. There was no such thing as interviews in the morning. To be specific, if you want a specific, we didn't, when Tet Offensive hit, I walked to work that night, and the first contact was behind my quarters. There was an Arvin armory, small armory, and the Viet Cong hit that to get more weapons. So, and I walked to work, and I was trapped on the base for 3 days as Tet 1 went off. We didn't know how bad it was until the next news week came out. I said, "Holy cow, was that us?" You know, and my mother's scared to death, and everybody at home was scared to death, and I fixed that. I'm proud of that. I found a way to cheat. Proud of it. So we didn't know what you guys knew, and they didn't know. The news, I believe it was Newsweek. You'll check that if somebody asks you. Don't get you wrong. And they showed the tanks going on to the embassy and all that mess, and we didn't know anything about that. We did have an attack on the base. We did have some people killed. There was bad guys everywhere. Yeah, they were everywhere. The base was rocketed, either mortared or rocketed every night, and then they'd come on base as a friendly during the day and see where the rockets landed and then reject them the night before. We did have airplanes hit 30, 40 days in, then Tet Offensive 2 came in, and then 3 was much later on. Yes, it affected us. Yes, we were scared. They were shooting at us. I was in the command center executing strikes in the north. So I was worried about out-country strikes. There was multiple command centers. There was in-country and out-country, and then other kind of command centers. And I was worried about the out-country, so my job was to get to work, to break the frag, to work for the next mission, the next day's mission. And so, but did you run around laughing and scratching? The bases were all locked down for the first 3 days of Tet Offensive. We didn't leave the command post. You want a story that you do? You want another? You got one? You haven't?
Sure.
I can do this. It has to do with underwear. 3 days in underwear. You know how that works?
Right.
And the old joke is not true. We're not going to change underwear. You take mine, I'll take yours. We didn't turn them inside out, but we did have a class. You got military time?
I do. Air Force.
Proud of you.
This is the best service.
Yes. The Class 6 store is for booze.
Right.
There's a Class something else store for military clothing. It's now part of the BX, but anyway, one of our lead sergeant said, "I got you." So he made a raid on the Class store, and he hit what size are you guys? 32 short. We had enough T-shirts and underwear, and we kept. When you worked in a command post, when the generals weren't around, when the senior people, you were in a flight jacket or something. I was not a briefer at that time, but the briefers continued to brief every morning, and you took your good shirt off and hung it, and then you were in a flight jacket and a T-shirt,
Right.
and you were in a flight suit quite often, or you were with something. You weren't running around in underwear, sorry,
Right.
but we had the choice because we had to stay open because we're managing a war that's not around us.
Right.
The in-country command post was more activated in it. We were in a headquarters building, and it had concrete walls around it, and the rockets would hit every once in a while. They got the church right across the way from us, across the street. They burned up the church chapel. I went out the next morning. Later on, the rockets they hit between 4:15 and 5 o'clock in the morning. So you went to the bathroom at 4:30. And the neon lights in the command everywhere, the neon lights in the halls, all had wire under the neon to catch light when it came out of the socket.
Okay.
Coat hangers.
Right.
Because a detonation, 750 nearby, or some big something nearby, a close mortar would knock all the lights out. And usually 2 or 3 would fall, so you just walked in the glass. But I went out to talk to the head chaplain. He was crying, burned the chapel to the ground. Next morning, it's 5 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning. He's crying. I said, "What's the problem here?" He said, "We lost one man." Well, that's worth crying for. He said, "But I had just gotten the organ in, and it's sitting in front of me smoking, and the chapel's gone.
Right.
You know. And I said, and this is another colonel, and this is some colonel, and I guess that might have been Captain Clem by then. I don't know. So I said, sir, what's the purpose of the church? He says, to protect my people. Quit crying. All around the chapel on Tonson were quarters, people sleeping. The church building, thanks to the powers that be, took the hit. It hit a gray desk in the chapel, and somebody was sleeping under it, and he didn't survive. But the night before, there were between 50 and 100 soldiers in that church, in that chapel, sleeping on the floor. How's that?
Yeah.
And they all got out, and the colonel got out, and the organ was a mess. So that next Sunday, what did they do for chapel? Right where the chapel was. All the debris was hauled away, and they're standing. The organ is still, I think it was still smoking. I don't know what happened to that thing, but the search was continued. And we were all more and more stronger believers. But how am I doing? Good. Did I answer your question?
You did. So you're in Vietnam, 2 tours in Vietnam. One is fly, and one is...
2 tours in Southeast Asia.
Southeast Asia, okay.
I was in and out of Saigon on the flying tour and Takli, Thailand.
Okay.
For the second part of it, I was in Saigon, which is now, as you know, Ho Chi Minh. You know what it is.
Yeah.
Saigon. To all of us that you see, it's Saigon. I understand it's very nice. I have no desire to go back.
Right.
I didn't learn a thing.
So what happened? What do you do with the rest of your Air Force career? You're done with Vietnam.
I have
Kind of the highlights of what happened.
Yep, I have 9 some years in what I call direct involvement in Vietnam, Southeast Asia.
Right.
Flying tour, a bit short. When I had 27 combat support missions, the next highest pilot had 9. So as I told you to begin with,
right.
Oh, Clem will go, I'll go do it. So you made a lot of interesting people.
Right.
Some more uninteresting than others. They sent me from there to Project Corona Harvest. This was a vice chief of the Air Force special study. The title was The Effectiveness of Air Power in Southeast Asia. And the answer is 88.613%. This was working for Vice Chief of the Air Force. I was in the oral history department. I and my boss set up the oral history program for people coming back from Southeast Asia.
Right.
And there's a wonderful collection of oral histories. At the top, we were at the top end at Maxwell Field, Corona Harvest Studies. Okay. I did, I think, something like 42 of them. We did the level of General Jones, Dean Rusk, Ambassador Stevens. I did Ambassador Stevens. He's the guy that, there's 2 wars over there, you knew that. There's the Vietnam War and the Laotian War, and he ran the Laotian War. And try and figure that out, it's too hard, because he had 13th Air Force sources, and we had 7th Air Force sources. But I did him in the Pentagon. I did a wonderful interview with Ed Lansdale. General Lansdale. Wonderful, wonderful guy. A guy that personally quelled the Huck Rebellion in the Philippines, was involved early with Ziem, President Ziem, the early activities, Farmgate, and not Muscle Shoals, Farmgate. I did some Muscle Shoals work as well. But because of that, I have a very broad knowledge of the war. And this is before the Pentagon Papers.
Right.
We put out several volumes of high quality information on the war. And then Pentagon Papers came out, and we destroyed most of our copies. There's enough copies. And we were in a position when somebody had said something that was important. Technically, let's say that. I'm not saying that the general's not important. We had a path to the tank, to get the information right to the tank and JCS. So, for instance, the radio Have Quick secure voice radios came out of one of those interviews and went straight to the Air Force, and they immediately put a PA number against it. So we were making great tapes, but not for the sake of them. We were making tapes to do something, how to improve the effectiveness. Again, Yeah, none of us brag, and none of us are heroes. Please, I am no hero, but I'm having a haircut on base at Maxwell Field, and there's an Army lieutenant colonel next to it, and it's Major Clem now,
right.
And we're getting up there. Hang on, I made full colonel, so it comes. And he says, "What are you doing?" Clip, clip, cut, cut, cut. Well, we're doing interviews about the effectiveness of air power. Clip, 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 clip. And he says, "Well, I'm from Bennings." I said, "No, I didn't know that. What do you got over there?" He said, "I got a whole lot of Vietnam experience. Why don't you come interview us?" I said, "The important question is, do you have any beer?" He said, "Come on." So I get to my boss, who I dearly, dearly, dearly loved. Saved my life, saved my career. I got a series of people that saved my ass. That's a military term. I said, "Boss, we're going over what he says." He said, "This is going to work, isn't it, Clem?" I said, "This is really going to work." So off we go. And we interviewed some enormous number, like 42, 45 in 4 days. And he got the colonel, and this is thrown together. So they're saying, "Hey, Dennis, you want to volunteer? Be here in 20 minutes." And these are guys and still got mud on them and whatnot, and they're talking, and they like the Air Force. And I'm partway through the second day, and by 42 interviews, you're just numb with these wonderful heroes. And in comes a black Army guy, and he's got pieces missing all over the place. There's white skin here, there's regular color, there's his tone of brown here, there's no hair here. And he said, "Sir, I was napalmed by the Air Force, and I want to talk to you." And I didn't know whether to hug him or cry. It was not a hugging period, it was not a crying period, so you shook hands.
Right.
"Thank you, Sergeant." He had 3 or 4 stripes. And he was not with the famous Army general that called stuff on him, the football player. Who was that? West Point hero that called napalm on him. He was not with that group, but his leader called napalm on him, and he said, "The Viet Cong right there died. The American right here had some on him, and I got splashed on me." It was that close. So he says, "I love you guys." And the old joke of "there's nothing beats smell of napalm in the morning," he was ready to say that. He says, "Thank God you got." And they came right into trees with him. It was awful, awful. But we got some marvelous interviews. The winner of that one, there was a full colonel, and he was having trouble with a sniper. This is in country. This is South Vietnam, and he had lost 3 or 4 guys, and he's now mad. He said, "I don't like to lose my guys. This is not," and we couldn't find a guy. So we called for air power.
Right.
And we sent him 3 or 4 B-57s. And I know there was, I think, 6 bombs expended. And they blew the whole countryside up, Right. And the Viet Cong had snipers in trees, and they were expendable. So they were just up there till somebody killed him. And this guy said on tape, this colonel said, "If we can't afford to protect our men, let's go to hell home." And he's got his eagles all on the recording. Well, you can't see it, but he's full colonel. That was in the tank, the JCS, the next morning. Because the argument then was close air support. The Army wanted more close air support. And out of that and other things came the contract with the service that the Air Force does not have armed helicopters, with a couple of exceptions, special exceptions. And the Army doesn't. The Army's lost their C-7s out of that thing to the Air Force.
Right.
And we tried to serve them, and we did okay. We did a much better organization and much more efficient.
Right.
But if you've been in combat for 3 weeks and you're out of ice cream, is that a crisis? Is that a national emergency? If you're out of fuses,
Right.
it's an emergency to you.
Right.
And remember, the emergency to you in the field and the emergency to me back home was totally different,
Right.
because I need fuses.
Right.
So we figured out how to set up. What I'm getting at is priorities, so that we, if you say you're out of fuses, man, that was the top of the prop you got. Or if you're out of obviously medical supplies, you're out of food. If you're out of pencils and paper, well, the hell with it. But it made us much more efficient.
How would you, looking back on it, say that Vietnam, your time in Southeast Asia, how's that affected your life and your service there?
I'm a Quaker. I'm still a birthright Quaker. I don't like to kill. I think we can solve a lot of things We can really solve it if you'll get a football team together, and I'll get a Navy football team together, and we'll have a fight on the field. And you cross the white line, have a most wonderful fight, and then you go back and have some iced tea together.
Right.
I'm for that. War is hell. I came out of, as I said, 9 years of that, and I was a mess. I couldn't fly for 10 months, watching my friends die. In my Hawaii job, I was in emergency action duty officer. I was also combat reporting. So when Bernie got shot down, who was taking some missions that I could have taken, I got the report when it came in. And when Ken North was captured, I was on duty when I got the report he was captured. At that position in a command post, all combat losses, American combat losses, came through American, well, not Army, not helicopters. Let's say Air Force, but we got some information on Navy losses as well. Came through us on the way to SINCPAC. The chain above us which was SINCPAC,
right,
on Oahu, and then above that was JCS. So we were dual-hatted. We reported to the SINCPAC, and we also reported to the Chief Staff Air Force. And when you're doing that, my worst, as you saw in one of my notes, my worst night, I had to make 8 reports. 8, and that's call all the Air Force generals on the island in a conference and tell them we lost another one. And in Hawaii it's all wonderful.
right,
Nice, the palm trees are waving, and I'm reporting on my dead Air Force comrades. And then not to fly when you go over there, because I'm trained to fly. Right. So let me go fly. I had a restriction because I knew plans that they were afraid I would tell. And yes, if you pull out my fingernails, I'm probably going to tell a lie, because I know how to lie. Let me jump for another one. Sandy's going to be at me for telling a story. My father came back from War I, troop ships now, the new airplanes.
right,
And my father could tell a story. He never let the truth get in the way of a good story. He says to 50 million guys on the boat, I'll be the first off the boat. And this is one striper. My daddy's one striper,
right,
see? And he never saw me in a uniform. So, and have all the boats gone. My daddy's 6'3", and he's lean and mean. And he was a Quaker till he got thrown out of the church. His father got thrown out of the church because his father married a indentured servant. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. So I get to the wharf in Bayonne, and they say, I don't know, one striper, Clement, you're the first off. And of course, that's a lot of BS for that. It turns out his mother was very sick. He was a South Jersey boy, and he went back for 30 days, 30 days leave. So now he comes back to Dick's. The war's over. The officers that are left, and there's very few, are playing tennis, they're playing golf, they're screwing around, whatever you do when there's no war.
right,
And Daddy was the only guy in the unit that could type. So I have some of his records out in the car. He was a typist. So he's at work, and he's still got his one stripe, and he's typing. And the orders coming in every day, and he has to fill them out. Well, all the officers are playing golf. Officers play golf. You didn't know that probably.
right,
And so they said, Roy, you sign for me. Here's my signature. And Charlie says, here, you sign for me. So he's signing for everything but the captain. And he's there, and he's working his heart out, and he's looking around, and there ain't no orders for Clement over here, and there ain't no orders for Clement over here. And one day he said, they're not coming, because his whole unit was disbanded. The last guy out, they're all getting off the ship and they're all going home, And the last guy out, there's some extra paper. Well, you know what to do with that. Take it with you and throw it away.
right,
So he said, he's going to come. So one morning he said, well, this is it. Typed that thing out, put all those signatures in, sent it into the captain. The captain said, geez, Roy, I really like you here. You're really, you need to stay in the Army because you can type. He's a farm boy, you can type. I'll be back with the horses, which he didn't like.
right,
So he said, well, I'll sign it. Okay? So he he signed himself out of the Army. During the war, Daddy was a big shot in Woodbury, New Jersey, in YMCA. For 43 years, he was the secretary knew all the kids, knew all of them going to war. So what are the kids doing during the war? What are they doing? When they need clearances, it comes back to your local town. Who knew all the kids in the local town? Daddy.
right,
So many a night, I'm a little guy, and there's a knock on the door at 9 o'clock or 9, all kind of times. Daddy'd come down, put his robe on. It'd be FBI, it'd be CIA, it'd be people he didn't know who the hell. Well, how was a kid? And Daddy would look, that son of a bitch. Because Daddy knew he went in.
Right.
And he went in because Daddy put him in. Because he was true story, ne'er-do-well. This is a small town. And let's say, I won't say you, but let's say Harry over here had just put some gas on the Nasty Mary's cat's tail and lit it. And somebody else had taken the white fence down off of the soap place in there, and somebody put a Model T up on the telephone lines, which they did.
Right.
So the middle of the night, I'm off the security for just a second. The middle of the night, here comes the sheriff, and here comes the recruiter. Well, we got old Charlie. What did he do? Well, he lit the old lady's cat tail on fire. Oh no, he didn't know. He promised us not. No. So they would decide, and Daddy would get Judge Wick on the phone.
Right.
And well, we got to haul a kid in. So Daddy would turn to. I've listened to it. Daddy would turn to the recruiting sergeant and say, "What time's the bus leave for Fort Dix?" You with me? What time's the bus?
Right.
Well, the bus leaves at 6:30, which is the correct time. Okay. They turn to the sheriff. What time are you going to go to his house to pick the kid up? We're going to pick him up at 9 o'clock as soon as we get to work. Okay. Son, here's your answer.
Right.
You're going to jail for taking this fence down, but the bus leaves at 6:30. Okay. See how that worked?
Yeah.
So the recruiting guys in every small town did the same thing. But now then he gets in and he wants to have security clearance. So there it is, old Charlie. And of course, Dad said, "That's the greatest kid in the world. I personally put him in," which is true. I personally convinced him to go. And the recruiter said, "We personally did it." Judge Wick he was a wonderful guy. That's why. So Daddy signed himself out of the service. So now it's 1983 and I'm ready to retire. And I'm in OSD, working for the Secretary of Defense. And some of my records are here and some are there. And it's time to go and I'm tired. And me and a Navy captain are tired. I said, "I can retire. I'm an 06. I can retire you." He says, "I can retire you." We didn't touch the financial thing. We didn't touch the leaves, but all the library still has guard on me, and I'm here safe.
There you go.
How's that?
Very good. So one of the missions of this project is to preserve these oral histories for future generations.
Super.
You want to send a message to somebody that might see this in 50 years or 100 years down the road?
Sure. Thank you for wearing the uniform of your country. It's the most wonderful thing you can do wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Be proud. I am a guy that says volunteer, so you can fuss at me for that. As I said, you get some interesting things. Once in a while, you get a good thing. You get places that you may not want to go, but you can't tell. Keep your heart, keep strong. Set up your own rules of what's right and wrong, and follow that. I'm not telling you to go over the other side. I'm not telling you to tell your colonel to pound sand. I'm saying that you're an educated, particularly if you're an American, you're an educated serviceman. You've got a good head on your shoulders. Look after your people. If you're an officer, look after your people. You can go without dinner. You can go without anything. Get your troops fed. Get your troops cared for. Wave that flag. Mine's right here on my shirt. I had a bigger one for this morning, and the pin fell off of it. So always wear the flag of your country, and be proud. Remember that afterwards you've got to think back on what you did, and it ought to be with great pride for your unit, for your service, for your country. Thank you.
Right. Well, on behalf of the Americans of Wartime Museum, I want to thank you for your service to your country and for sitting down and telling us your story. Really appreciate it.
You're most welcome.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.